Welcome back to All About Winning Daily Fantasy Sports. In this video, I'm going to cover the running back position for Week 2 in the NFL. As I mentioned in my previous video where I covered quarterback strategy for Week 2, I mentioned how when I'm going to build lineups for DraftKings, a starting point for me is to look at the lines at Las Vegas. I'm primarily interested in the game totals, and I highlight the games that have the highest totals because I feel like if these games are going to be high scoring, then they're going to have the players involved to do the scoring. I also am a firm believer that Vegas isn't in the business of giving away money, um, meaning that they're not going to put a super high total on a game so everyone can take the under and give away some money. So that is one of the starting point for me when I'm building lineups. That doesn't mean I won't look at and consider other players. Um, but like I said, that's just where I like to begin. With running backs, probably the biggest importance to me is touches, and how much of a percentage is this running back involved in the offense. By touches, I mean receptions and carries. And the running backs that get a lot of touches will get you a lot of points in fantasy football. Last week, for instance, the top five running backs were McCaffrey with 45.90 points, Eckler with 39.40 points, Cook with 29 points, Henry with 28.90 points, and Mack with 28.40 points. That was the top five running backs last week. Now, with that being said, if you look at the number of touches that they had, McCaffrey had 36, Eckler had 18, Cook had 23, Henry had 20, and Mack had 25. Now, if you'd have took McCaffrey with his 36 touches and combined him with any of the other running backs, those top five running backs, you'd have been well on your way to having a good day in daily fantasy football. With that being said, when I'm building lineups, I meant to mention this earlier. The two running backs that you have to plug in, I also like to put a running back in the flex spot. More times than not, I'm looking to get a running back there. And my thought when I'm building these lineups is that I want to get a total of 70 or more touches between those three running backs. Touches generate points. And again, looking back at last week, if you'd have took any combination of those running backs with McCaffrey, if you'd have took McCaffrey with any of the other running backs, any combination of those top five, you'd have went well over 70 touches. Another part of my strategy, along with touches, is to try to spend up for one running back if I can. Um, I don't always get to do this, but if I can't spend up, then I'm definitely going to look for the value in the running backs with the highest amount of touches. And I try to stay away from running backs that are involved in committees. Um, the numbers last week weren't there. I wanted to mention one particular running back. The numbers weren't there in week 1 for Saquon Barkley to be one of the top touch running backs, but he has shown the propensity in the past to have a high percentage of touches um, for the New York Giants. He is the focus of their offense. So players like Barkley, McCaffrey, Elliott, they aren't affected by game script. Meaning, it doesn't matter if they're winning or losing. They're going to be involved in the game, and they're usually high on my list if I can get to them with the salary that's available. Now, looking ahead in week 2 on running backs, using my formula of touches and game script, I came up with the following players and a little bit about them and what to look at. I would like to mention that last year, the worst run defenses in the NFL were Arizona was worse, followed by Cincinnati, Kansas City, um, the Giants, and Miami. So this week, looking ahead, I'd like to. I'm very interested in Mark Ingram from Baltimore. He's a large home favorite. Um, but I am somewhat cautious because he was really efficient with his carries last week against Miami, and he's the primary running back. He had 14 carries, but Gus Edwards actually had more carries than Mark Ingram, so that's kind of a concern for me. But in the game script that is that you can look at being projected by the total and the line, they're expecting Baltimore to pretty much have their way at home this week against Arizona, and if that is a really good game script for Mark Ingram. Saquon Barkley, very interested in Saquon this week. The offense runs through Barkley. The problem with Barkley week in and week in, especially on DraftKings, is the salary. If you look right here, Barkley is going to be $9,200 this week. So if you use him, um, first thing is you got to definitely hope that he uh, scores enough points to cover a salary like that, and you're going to have to find value somewhere else to plug him in. Buffalo is 25th against the running back, and after week one, so I always like to consider Barkley. I don't always get to him because of the salary, but he is definitely one that's on the radar this week. Another running back of interest is Sony Michel from New England. New England is going into Miami as an 18.5 point favorite. I don't know that I've ever seen a point spread that high in the NFL, especially a road favorite. And the game script just says New England's going to blow Miami out, and when they get a big enough lead, they just sit back and rely on the running backs. Um, so, like I said, the game script, the game total for that game is fairly reasonable. They have New England with an implied total of 33, and there's a game total of 48. So Sony Michel is another running back that's on the radar, and he is actually on DraftKings. He is $6,200, so he's $3,000 less than Barkley. The thing about Michel, though, he does not get a lot of passes thrown to him. Um, James White usually gets a lot of the passes out of the backfield, so you're going to have to depend on Sony Michel to get a lot of carries and hopefully a touchdown or two. And touchdowns are have a lot of variance, and they're not guaranteed week to week. Another running back that's on the radar this week is Josh Jacobs from Oakland. Josh had a huge game last week for Oakland. Thing that scares me about Josh is that the game script for him last week was perfect. Oakland was winning, and they were able to pretty much lean on him. He had 23 carries for 85 yards, but he only caught one reception. It went for 28 yards, but that was the perfect game script for Josh Jacobs. This week, with Kansas City coming to town, they're probably not going to be able to lean on the running game. And if Kansas City's running up and down the field on them, David Carr is going to have to put the ball in the air to try to keep up. And as I mentioned last year, Kansas City was 30th against the running back, but that's from a lot of running backs getting passes out of the backfield. Now, like I said, Jacobs only had one target out of the backfield last week, but they really didn't need to put the ball in the air. They didn't need to throw the ball to him. He racked up a lot of yards and carries in that game script. So it'll be interesting to see if how Jacob is used in what would be pretty much a negative game script in comeback mode. Another running back of high interest this week, and similar to Barkley, is Ezekiel Elliott. The problem with Ezekiel, with Elliott, just like Saquon, is if you look right here, he's $8,700. Now, he's another running back that's not affected by game script. It doesn't matter if the Cowboys are winning or losing. Zeke's going to be on the field. Every now and then, Prescott will vulture a touchdown, but I do think Zeke's role will increase this week. Last week, I believe he only had 13 carries because he sat out the entire preseason and missed all those practices. But Zeke will probably have a bigger role in the offense this week. It's just a matter of getting up to that 8,700, and if you can find some value in other places. Another running back that I'm interested in is Dalvin Cook from Minnesota. He could receive a lot of attention on the road in Green Bay as Minnesota tries to keep Aaron Rodgers on the bench. One good way of not getting involved in a shootout with Green Bay is to keep Aaron on the bench. But he could also be another running back that's not going to be affected by game script. He does catch passes out of the backfield. So if they were coming back, you could see a scenario with Cook on the field a lot. And the game is projected to have a total of, I believe, game total. It's a low game total, 44.5 points. But if Minnesota can keep it close and lean on their running game, Cousins didn't put the ball in the air much last week. It was pretty much the Dalvin Cook show. So he is another one of interest, and you can, if you look down, he's actually $2,000 less than Barkley. Other running backs this week as favorites who could carry the load are Pittsburgh's James Conner, and Derrick Henry for Tennessee. Conner had a pretty big game last year against Seattle, and Henry last week was huge against Cleveland. And he's actually this week he is only $6,000, and let's take a look at it. Last week he had 19 carries for 84 yards and 2 touchdowns, and Tennessee just had their way with Cleveland, and Indianapolis is not that strong against the run. They're coming in at 17, so it's middle of the road. But this again would with the right game script, you could see a scenario where Derrick Henry would be the player that Tennessee leans on and gets a lot of carries. He does not get a lot of passes out of the backfield. They like to throw the ball to Deion Lewis out of the backfield. But if they're winning the game and just using Henry to pound the ball, it'd be a scenario where he could be a value running back and get you a significant amount of fantasy points. So in summary, my running backs targets for this week are going to be Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, James Conner, Ingram, and Edwards from Baltimore. Not sure. I've never really done it before. The combination, because oftentimes a coach will go with the hot hand, and I really don't like running back committees. But Sony Michel, Josh Jacobs, Ezekiel Elliott, and Dalvin Cook are of high interest to me. Another running back that I'm somewhat interested in, but he's already got the questionable tag on him, is Joe Mixon for Cincinnati. He did have a limited practice today, so he's a game time decision where it's questionable. So if Mixon's not in the game, I feel like a really sneaky value pick may be Giovanni Bernard for Cincinnati, who was only $5,300, and last week carried the ball 7 times for 21 yards, and he did catch 2 passes for 42 yards. And in the past, Bernard is spelled Mixon, and sometimes been able to fill in pretty well for him. As I mentioned in the previous video when I talked about the quarterbacks, um, I will add these running backs to our player pool. Um, so now we have running backs with the, the quarterbacks. And in my next video, I'm going to cover wide receivers. And then I'm going to do a video with tight ends and defense special teams. And then we're going to take all these players that we've talked about through the week and we're going to combine them into a player pool and build a few lineups and using just those players and see what we can come up with. And so thank you for watching. If you'll hit the like button for me and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you real soon with information about the running back, or excuse me, the wide receivers. Thanks again.